Part 1. The beginning of the story. The setting. Bryan and Jessica are a young married couple from New York City. He is a charismatic police officer who has been on the force for 3 years, and she is a talented web designer who works with her best friend Martha. Their relationship seems to be strong, full of trust and love, but everyday life begins to erase the romance. Bryan stays at work late more and more often, and Jessica feels lonely and alienated. Conflict. One day, Bryan's friend from California, Coy, the owner of the Faco furniture factory and the Wow Cafe, visits them. Coy is a successful, self-confident, and slightly egotistical man. He quickly attracts Jessica's attention with his manner of communication and a certain self-confidence that seems so interesting and unusual to her in the context of her routine family life. Part 2. Attachment to Coy. Coy genuinely admires Jessica's beauty and takes a direct interest in her when Bryan is not around. He encourages her to visit his cafe, compliments her on her work and appearance, and their conversations grow deeper each time. Jessica, who at first perceives it as just friendly conversation, begins to notice that she thinks about Coy more and more. Each meeting with him is an opportunity to feel important and attractive. Conflict. Over time, Jessica begins to question her feelings for Bryan. She hides her encounters with Coy and doesn't even tell Martha about them, even though she has always shared all her experiences with her. She likes the sense of secrecy and excitement that her connection with her husband's friend brings. Part 3. Coy's manipulations. Coy begins to skillfully manipulate Jessica by exploiting her dissatisfaction with her relationship with Bryan. He tells her that she deserves more, that such a beautiful and talented woman needs a man who will truly appreciate her. He invites her to business dinners, ostensibly to discuss the possibility of collaborating on the design of his new cafe, but in reality these meetings are filled with subtle hints and flirtation. Conflict. Jessica, despite her internal doubts, is increasingly drawn into this new world full of compliments and attention. She likes Coy, and although she convinces herself that it is only a friendship, her feelings are becoming more complex. Every time she returns home after meeting Coy, she is riddled with guilt, but she quickly finds excuses, explaining to herself that it is just fun. Part 4. The first signs of betrayal. One evening becomes decisive. Bryan stays out late again, and Coy invites Jessica to a special dinner. He convinces her that she deserves this vacation. They visit a luxurious restaurant, where Coy continues to tell her about his life, business, and plans for the future, gently emphasizing that he needs a woman like her by his side. Conflict. The dinner ends with a passionate kiss, and Jessica, succumbing to her emotions, finds herself in Coy's arms. She realizes that she has crossed the line, but it gives her a sense of forbidden and exciting. When she returns home, she decides to hide everything from Bryan, convincing herself that it was just a mistake. Part 5. Bryan's suspicions. Bryan begins to notice that Jessica is withdrawing. She becomes withdrawn, avoids talking about her meetings, and often spends her evenings out of the house, supposedly because of work. He doesn't want to suspect her, but as a police officer, he feels that something is wrong. His intuition leads him to start surveillance. Conflict. One day, when he notices that Jessica has received a late message from Coy, Bryan decides to follow her. He sees her entering his Wow Cafe, and his suspicions grow. He tries to start a conversation with her about their relationship, but Jessica assures him that everything is fine by looking away and avoiding details. Part 6. An explosion of emotions. The next week, Bryan decides to surprise her and leaves work early. He goes home, but Jessica is not there. After checking her location through the shared app, he discovers that she is back at Coy's cafe. Bryan immediately heads there. Conflict. When he enters the cafe, he sees Coy and Jessica sitting at a table in the corner, holding hands. Shocked, Bryan demands an explanation. Jessica, seeing Bryan, is confused, and Coy bravely confesses that he is in love with her and is not going to back down. Part 7, a painful revelation. After the emotional scene at the cafe, Jessica and Bryan return home to talk. She confesses her feelings for Coy and explains that she feels forgotten because of Bryan's work. Her betrayal is explained as a desire to get the attention she has been missing, and Bryan begins to realize how difficult it has been for Jessica to be in the shadow of his profession. Conflict. Bryan is desperate because he loves Jessica, but now he is not sure if he can forgive her for cheating on him. He accuses Coy of manipulating him and ruining their marriage. At the same time, Jessica, feeling guilty, does not know whom to choose. Part 8, the search for forgiveness. Jessica decides to stay with Bryan and cut all ties with Coy. She asks Bryan for forgiveness and promises never to repeat her mistakes. They begin to work together. Conflict. Bryan cannot fully forgive Jessica, constantly suspecting that she might cheat again. He tries to pay more attention to her, but these efforts often feel excessive and forced. Part 9, Coy's return. Coy, despite Jessica's requests to cut ties, decides to fight for her heart. He writes to her about his true feelings, saying that he is the only one who can make her happy. Coy promises Jessica a life of adventure and luxury that she deserves, hinting that her marriage to Bryan is only out of habit. Jessica, though she tries to ignore the messages, feels that a part of her still longs for Coy. He suggests that she meet him one last time to say goodbye, but he does so with a subtle hint of the possibility of a farewell adventure. Part 10, the last temptation. Jessica hesitates for a long time, but eventually agrees to meet Coy at the Wow Cafe. Coy looks incredibly attractive and confident, and he suggests that she spend the night at the hotel to say goodbye without further ado. He plays on her feelings and makes her doubt her marriage. Bryan, meanwhile, senses something is wrong and decides not to leave her unattended. With the help of one of his colleagues, he gains access to the surveillance cameras near the cafe. When he sees Jessica getting into Coy's car, he decides to act. Part 11, Confrontation. When Coy and Jessica arrive at the hotel, they are in for a surprise. Bryan is already there. Angry and determined, he tries to stop Jessica from making a fatal mistake. He rushes at Coy and accuses him of trying to ruin their lives. They exchange harsh words, and Jessica witnesses two men, who were once friends, trying to work things out for her. Part 12, the final decision. After the confrontation, Bryan gives Jessica an ultimatum: either she chooses their marriage and they work to rebuild trust, or he will leave for good. Jessica decides that she wants to go back to him and fix her mistakes. She asks Coy to leave her alone and returns home, promising Bryan to be honest and open again. Part 13, Reconstructing the relationship. Jessica and Bryan decide to see a counselor to sort out their feelings and rebuild their trust. They are both ready to work on creating a healthier and stronger marriage. They realize that openness and trust are the keys to true love, not short-term emotions. Part 14, The Shadow of the Past. After several months of therapy with a psychologist, Bryan and Jessica are trying to get their lives back on track, but the shadow of their betrayal haunts them. Bryan feels that he will never be able to fully trust Jessica again, and she, in turn, suffers from guilt and is constantly trying to prove her loyalty. When Coy returns to California, he initially disappears from their lives, but after a while he begins to unobtrusively remind them of himself. He sends Jessica neutral messages, happy holidays, that look innocent enough, but each one of them makes her anxious. Each new message from Coy becomes a catalyst for another conflict between Jessica and Bryan. Part 15, Coy's Return. Jessica begins to ignore Coy's messages in order not to give Bryan a reason to be jealous. However, Coy decides to come to New York under the pretext of a business trip to meet her in person. He convinces her to come for an innocent coffee, assuring her that his visit has no romantic intentions and he just wants to remain friends. Despite her internal doubts, Jessica agrees to the meeting, thinking that it will help her to finally close this stage of her life. But the meeting with Coy turns out to be anything but innocent. He hints that he still has feelings for her, and that she deserves something better than a life of mistrust and jealousy. Part 16: Manipulation and Pressure. Coy becomes more and more persistent. He uses psychological tricks, constantly reminding Jessica of the chemistry they once had. He convinces her that their connection is more than a casual affair. Jessica begins to question her own feelings and realizes that Coy is once again skillfully manipulating her emotions, but now it seems even more confusing. She begins to suspect that Coy never stopped following her, as he is well aware of her personal life, as if he is getting first-hand information about her. The thought makes her fearful and anxious, but Coy assures her that it is only concern and genuine interest. Chapter 17: Bryan learns the truth. During another argument, Bryan, nervous that Jessica is seeing Coy again, accidentally overhears her on the phone. He hears Coy trying to convince Jessica that their story is not over. Hearing this, Bryan decides to find out for himself and directly addresses Coy, demanding that he leave them alone. Coy, however, only smiles and hints to Bryan that he can provide Jessica with a better life than he can offer. Conflict. Bryan is torn between wanting to protect his family and feeling deeply resentful of Jessica for getting involved in this tangled mess again. He warns her that this is her last chance, and if she ever sees Coy again, their marriage will be over. Part 18: The Decisive Choice. Jessica, who is still hesitating, finally decides to end things once and for all. She meets Coy at the Wow Cafe and explains that it really is over and she can't risk her marriage anymore. Coy tries to convince her, but Jessica stands her ground, reminding him that their connection has only brought her suffering and instability. Coy, realizing that he is losing his influence, shows his true colors by mocking Jessica and accusing her of being weak and insecure. He walks away, leaving her alone, but his last words leave her heart uneasy. Part 19: Returning to a Normal Life. Jessica tries to resume her life with Bryan. She stops receiving messages from Coy, and gradually the pressure is off. Her relationship with Bryan is getting stronger, but the shadow of betrayal still lingers. Bryan, although he tries to forgive, sometimes wonders if Coy is still in her thoughts. Chapter 20: An Unexpected Message. A few months later, when everything seems to be back to normal, Jessica receives a strange unsigned message that reads, "See you soon. K." She deletes the message, thinking it's just a prank, but her heart is racing. The ending. Coy leaves their lives, but his influence will be felt in their relationship for a long time. Jessica and Bryan decide to leave the past behind, but the shadow of his manipulation and betrayal will forever remain a reminder of how easy it is to succumb to temptation and lose what is most precious. The Perfect Life in a Small Town. Setting. Michael and Sarah have built a seemingly perfect life together over 30 years, living in a small town. They raised their children, supported each other through thick and thin, and built a beautiful family home. But recently, Sarah feels a longing for excitement and the passion she remembers from their early years. Conflict. Sarah's restlessness grows. She loves Michael deeply, but can't ignore her craving for something more. When she confides in their daughter, Emily, about her feelings, Emily unexpectedly suggests that Sarah take a night for herself to explore these emotions, believing it might help her mother reignite her marriage. A risky suggestion. Setting. At Emily's encouragement, Sarah meets James, a kind and charming man from a nearby town, for a casual evening out. James, a widower, has been lonely since losing his wife and finds Sarah's energy refreshing. Conflict. What begins as innocent companionship turns into a deeper emotional connection. Although she hasn't crossed any boundaries, Sarah starts to feel drawn to James in a way she hasn't felt for years. Torn between her loyalty to Michael and the thrill of her newfound feelings, she becomes increasingly conflicted. The bond deepens. Setting. As Sarah and James continue meeting in secret, Michael starts to notice changes in her behavior. She's more distracted and distant, and Michael can't ignore the sense that something has shifted between them. Meanwhile, Sarah's internal conflict grows as her connection with James intensifies. Conflict. When Sarah tells Emily about her growing feelings, Emily suggests it's better to experience this one night with James and move on, convinced that her mother will return more appreciative of her marriage. Hesitantly, Sarah agrees, believing that one night will satisfy her need for excitement and give her the clarity she's seeking. The night of decision. Setting. Sarah meets James for a candlelit dinner by the lake, and for a few hours, they let their guards down. They share laughter, life stories, and finally a kiss that brings a sense of excitement Sarah has missed. As the evening unfolds, she feels free and adored. Conflict. Though she finds herself entranced by the night's intimacy, Sarah is overwhelmed by guilt. She knows her heart ultimately belongs to Michael, and decides to end her time with James and refocus on her marriage. But she's not prepared for how Michael will react to her absence when she returns home. The revelation. Setting. Michael, growing increasingly worried, confronts Emily about Sarah's behavior. Reluctantly, Emily admits that her mother is with someone else, believing this confession might help Michael understand Sarah's needs better. Conflict. Hurt and betrayed, Michael feels his world collapse. He confronts Sarah, who returns home feeling relieved that her night with James is over. Michael's pain is palpable, and despite her attempts to explain, he accuses her of destroying their family. A deep rift forms between them as he struggles to forgive her actions. The struggle for redemption. Setting. Sarah, devastated by the consequences of her choices, vows to repair her marriage. She does everything to show Michael her love and commitment, but Michael's pain runs deep. They agree to counseling, but the road to recovery is rocky, and they both question whether they can overcome the scars left by betrayal. Conflict. The emotional distance between them grows, and Michael considers ending their marriage. Sarah feels helpless, realizing the depth of the hurt she's caused and wondering if their relationship can ever heal. Forgiveness and moving forward. Setting. Months later, Michael begins to soften, recognizing the love they shared through the years and the life they built together. Sarah remains committed to mending their relationship, and they begin to find moments of peace and connection once again. Resolution. With time, Sarah and Michael discover a renewed appreciation for each other. They understand that mistakes can test even the strongest bonds, but love, forgiveness, and resilience can pave the way to a new beginning. Conclusion: a lesson in love and loss. In this tale of love, betrayal, and forgiveness, Sarah and Michael learn that even the deepest wounds can heal when love is genuine and hearts are open. This story captures the fragility and strength of marriage, showing how one night can lead to profound understanding, and ultimately, a second chance. This layered narrative holds the viewer's attention through the delicate balance of tension and empathy, leading them on a journey through real-life challenges and the ultimate power of forgiveness.